Good evening, this is BBC One Scotland. Now, the BBC News at 6 with Reeta Chakrabarti and Reporting Scotland with Laura Goodwin.
Today at 6, a surprise UK visit by the President of Ukraine to win more support for the war against Russia. A warm welcome from Rishi Sunak and then the pledge of more weapons.
You are with us, together with us, all Great Britain, you and your government. It's very important, so thank you very much for all support.
The UK will remain steadfast in supporting Ukraine and its people to defend itself against that aggression.
After a tour that's included Rome, Berlin and Paris, we'll be asking how successful President Zelensky has been in securing more help for the fight against Russia. Also on the programme. The Home Secretary says the UK should train its own lorry drivers and fruit pickers to bring down immigration. A British man goes on trial in Cyprus accused of murdering his ill wife. He tells the court she begged him to help end her life. And a BBC investigation into how adults are being diagnosed with ADHD after online assessments which are unreliable.
On Reporting Scotland at 6:30, police are under investigation after they used a taser on an 11-year-old boy who had a knife. And 90 years of saving lives, the air ambulance service supporting our remote and island communities.
Good evening. The President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has met Rishi Sunak at his country residence Chequers on the final stage of a whistle-stop diplomatic tour. The President personally thanked the UK and said he was grateful for the military aid it's providing because it could save the lives of his people in their fight against Russia. On Saturday, he was in Rome shaking hands with the Pope, whom he invited to Kiev. Sunday was Berlin. Germany's leader, Olaf Scholz, announced a defence weapons package worth £2.4 billion. Then in Paris, President Macron promised more light tanks and armoured fighting vehicles. Today, Britain announced that it was sending Ukraine hundreds of long-range attack drones and air defence missiles. Our diplomatic correspondent Caroline Hawley reports. Let's join our Ukraine correspondent Hugo Bachega, who is in Kiev for us. Hugo, has President Zelensky achieved what he wanted to when he set out on this tour? Thank you. Hugo Bachega reporting there. The Home Secretary says there is no good reason the UK cannot train its own lorry drivers and fruit pickers. Suella Braverman says she wanted to reduce net migration. That's the difference between those entering and leaving the UK. Numbers for 2022 are expected to reach a record 700,000, driven partly by Ukrainian refugees and mostly by more people from outside the EU coming to work and study. Here's our political editor, Chris Mason. Thank you. Our political editor, Chris Mason, reporting. A British pensioner accused of murdering his ill wife has told a court in Cyprus that she begged him to help end her life. 74-year-old Janice Hunter, who had cancer, died in December 2021 at her home on the island. Her 75-year-old husband, David Hunter, says her death was assisted suicide. Our correspondent Fiona Trott was in court. Fiona, thank you. Exam season is starting for GCSE and A-level pupils and also for those taking technical qualifications in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And after the huge upheaval caused by COVID, England's exam regulator Ofqual says that students should be able to get the same grade they would have done if the pandemic hadn't happened. COVID led to an increase in top grades in 2020 and 21, but this year Ofqual wants what it calls a step back to normal. Here's our education editor, Branwen Jeffries. The time is just after 6:15, our top story this evening. A surprise UK visit by Ukraine's President Zelensky to win more support for the war against Russia. And coming up, after arriving as a tiny baby, what life is like for 5-year-old Anwar in Bangladesh's biggest Rohingya refugee camp.
On Reporting Scotland at 6:30, a couple driven from their home after being targeted by so-called paedophile hunters call on social media firms to remove posts containing unfounded allegations. And 90 years of saving lives, the air ambulance service supporting our remote and island communities.
adult patients are being diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, after online assessments that are unreliable, a BBC investigation has found. An undercover Panorama reporter was seen by 3 private clinics which all diagnosed him with ADHD and offered him powerful drugs, even though a full in-person assessment by the NHS showed that he didn't actually have the condition. The clinics insist that their assessments are thorough and that they follow national guidelines. Rory Carson reports. And you can see more on that story on Panorama, private ADHD clinics exposed, on the iPlayer now or on BBC One at 8 p.m. tonight. Now a look at some of the other stories making the news today. Regulator Ofcom said it's launched an investigation into Royal Mail's failure to meet its delivery targets in the past year, and it could hand out a fine. The British delivery firm fell short of its performance targets for first and second class mail and deliveries. A ballot on industrial action by senior doctors in England opens today. The British Medical Association said pay talks with the government ended on Saturday with a final offer that was unacceptable. Consultant salaries range from between £90,000 to £120,000, but the BMA says take-home pay has fallen by 35% since 2008. The Competition and Markets Authority will investigate whether any failure in competition is leaving customers paying higher supermarket prices than they should be. The watchdog hasn't seen specific concerns, but food and drink prices were over 19% higher in March than they were a year earlier. There have been multiple fires in 2 areas of Dorset as 13 cars were set alight overnight, with one fire spreading to a property. There were 65 emergency calls relating to the incidents in the Wimborne and Poole areas, as Duncan Kennedy reports. In Bangladesh, nearly 1 million Rohingya refugees living in the world's largest makeshift camp have narrowly avoided disaster from a cyclone which hit the coastline. Aid agencies say it's another reminder of just how vulnerable the refugees remain. The Prime Minister is calling on the international community to shoulder more responsibility. The Rohingya Muslims form one of several ethnic minorities in neighbouring Myanmar. In August 2017, a crackdown by the army meant that hundreds of thousands fled across the border into Bangladesh, forming camps around Cox's Bazar. At the time, the BBC told the stories of countless families who'd become refugees overnight. This month, we were given special access to the camp. Our South Asia correspondent, Rajini Vaidyanathan, and her team report now on the story of Anwar, a 5-year-old boy who's only known life in the camps. Several UK cancer charities are calling for VAT on sunscreen to be scrapped to make it more affordable. They say that many people are choosing to go without because of the rising cost of living. Sunscreen carries a 20% rate of tax, adding about £1.50 to the cost of a bottle. An ice cream parlour has changed the name of one of its products after a polite request from Marks & Spencer. Fabio's Gelato, based in Hitchin in Hertfordshire, began making its Percy Pig ice cream last week, but the name was short-lived, as John Donnison explains. Time for the weather now. Here's Stav. Stav.
Thanks, Rita. Good evening to you. What a decent start to the week. Plenty of sunshine around, albeit quite a chilly start. And you'll see the temperatures beginning to climb, perhaps into the low 20s. That's it from me, Rita.
Thank you very much, Stav. And that's the BBC News at 6. You can, of course, keep up with all the latest developments on the BBC website. And the news continues here on BBC One. As now it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Bye-bye.
Tonight on Reporting Scotland, police are under investigation after they used a taser on an 11-year-old boy who had a knife.
What's the time of the site, pal? Just throw the knife down.
The incident happened at a caravan park near Ayr in March. Police say there were no serious injuries. Also on tonight's programme. The couple driven from their home after being targeted by so-called paedophile hunters.
There was about 300 people outside my house. There was fireworks getting set off. There was boulders getting thrown. All the windows in our house have been smashed.
90 years of saving lives, the air ambulance service supporting our remote and island communities.
And coming up in sport, Owen Coyle quits Queen's Park, and as Glasgow Warriors prepare for their first European Cup final, one of the club's coaches tells us why the Scots inside have the edge against Toulon.
Hello, I'm Laura Goodwin. Welcome to Monday's programme. An investigation is underway after police tasered an 11-year-old boy who was armed with a knife. The incident happened at the Craig Tara Caravan Park near Ayr earlier this year. Footage shows officers asking the boy to put the weapon down before one of them fires the 50,000-volt stun gun. Here's our Home Affairs correspondent, David Cowan. Well, Katrina is with us now. It's an extraordinary story. We heard in your report that initial post has now been removed by Facebook. How did that happen? OK, Katrina, many thanks indeed. The First Minister, Humza Yousaf, says sections of the economy in Scotland need migration and criticised the UK government for regarding immigration as a dirty word. His comments come as the Home Secretary made a speech saying the UK government must reduce overall immigration numbers. Suella Braverman says there's no good reason the country cannot train its own lorry drivers and fruit pickers. Here's our Westminster correspondent, David Porter. Well, let's cross to our political editor, Glenn Campbell. Glenn, immigration, another area where the UK and Scottish governments differ. OK, Glenn, many thanks indeed. A 13-year-old boy has died in hospital after being hit by a car in Glasgow. Artian Lushaku was struck by a red Toyota Aygo in Balmore Road at around 6 o'clock last Wednesday evening. He was taken to the Royal Hospital for Children. Police say he died yesterday. An investigation is ongoing. Any witnesses are being urged to come forward. A former soldier who murdered his daughter's partner has been jailed for at least 17 and a half years. Daniel Langman strangled 28-year-old Anthony Collins during an attack at his flat in Port Glasgow in May 2021. The 48-year-old later claimed he lost control after finding his home in disarray the night before. Langman was given a life sentence at the High Court in Glasgow. A fisherman escaped to a life raft after his boat caught fire off the Aberdeenshire coast. 2 lifeboats and a Coast Guard helicopter were sent to the scene near Stonehaven after the alarm was raised just before 3 o'clock this afternoon. The fisherman was uninjured. And the UK's first self-driving buses have taken passengers between Edinburgh and Fife. Operated by Stagecoach, the 14-mile route takes passengers over the Forth Road Bridge, running between Ferrytoll Park and Ride in Fife and Edinburgh Park Station. 2 members of staff are on board to monitor safety and help people with boarding and paying tickets. Hundreds of children of asylum seekers will be able to apply for free university tuition following an announcement from the Scottish Government. It comes after ministers lost a court case in which lawyers claimed the previous rules breached the human rights of Ola Jassim, a grade A medical student at Dundee University who was told she missed out on free tuition by a matter of weeks. Our social affairs correspondent Lucy Adams broke the story. It's quite complex. Can you break it down for us? OK. Lucy, you broke the original story, so thank you very much indeed for bringing us that update. Tonight's main news again. Police are under investigation after they used a taser on an 11-year-old boy who had a knife. And still to come, the air ambulance service supporting our remote and island communities celebrates 90 years of saving lives. The family of a woman from Dumfries who died on the Greek island of Crete say they've been told the investigation into her death has been closed again because of lack of evidence. The body of Jean Hanlon, who was 53, was found off the coast of Heraklion in March 2009. Well, Katie Hunter joins us now. Katie, tell us about this latest development. OK, Katie Hunter, many thanks. Now, since its very first flight 90 years ago, Scotland's air ambulance has been providing life-saving care to people who live on our islands or in remote communities. Crews are now dealing with more incidents than ever before and providing more sophisticated care. Our health correspondent Lisa Summers joined a crew on shift to see how the service has changed. Right, let's get tonight's sport now with Amy Irons. I feel we say this a lot. Bit of managerial news.
let's be honest, I don't think it would be football if there was not a week that passed, Laura, with managerial changes. Thank you very much. Good evening. Well, just days after his side were knocked out of the Premiership playoffs, Owen Coyle has stepped down as Queen's Park manager. The 56-year-old who led the club to Championship promotion last season says he leaves with a heavy heart. Yes, whether it's Cameron or, of course, our Andy. They don't like to do it sometimes the easy way, do they, Laura?
Oh, no, they like to keep us hanging.
Yeah.
We'll be rooting for them both, though.
We will. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Right, now over to Laura McKeever and Nick Sheridan to find out what's happening on BBC Scotland at 9 o'clock.
As the UK pledges more weapons for Ukraine, we will ask if enough is being done to bring the conflict to an end.
Scottish MP and skin cancer survivor Amy Callaghan tells us why she's campaigning to scrap VAT on sun cream.
And a Love Islander tells us about his new documentary on male body image.
We'll see you at 9.
Right, time now for the weather with Christopher, and it was a nice weekend and quite a nice start to the week.
Yeah, pretty decent Saturday for most of us. A bit more cloud on Sunday. The week ahead, though, looking good, Laura.
Good, that's what we like to hear.
Thanks very much indeed. Good evening to you. Some lovely sunshine for many parts of the country today. Lovely photos as ever from our weather watchers. Thanks for those. We've also seen a number of showers, and some of those really quite sharp, but they are fading away now. On Friday, more like high teens, if not 20 Celsius. Best of the sunshine and the warmth in the east and the northeast. That's the forecast for now, Laura.
Thank you, Christopher. Not bad at all. Now, a reminder of tonight's main story again. An investigation is underway after police tasered an 11-year-old boy who was armed with a knife. The incident happened at the Craig Tara Caravan Park near Ayr earlier this year. We will have your late news at around 10:30, but for the moment, we will leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. From all the team, do have a very good evening. Bye-bye.